gives me absolute great pleasure to invite, firstly of all, up on stage, Rebecca Ingram, who's the Chief Executive of Tourism Industry Aotearoa, Craig Hooley, Chief Operating Officer, Minor Hotels, David Ovendale, CEO, Top 10 Holiday Parks, Gavin Faull, Chairman and President, Swiss-Belhotels, and Graham Perry, Managing Director, Best Western Hotel Group, Australasia. Please welcome this very distinguished panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for this panel of very well-known individuals to this industry. But for some of you, I'll be less familiar. My name is Rebecca Ingram. I'm the Chief Executive of Tourism Industry Aotearoa, 4 months in, and very much looking forward to what lies ahead of us as we look at the summer of recovery. Gentlemen, I wonder if we might kick off with you introducing yourselves, and also let's talk about silver linings. So have you got a silver lining from the last couple of years that you'd like to share?
Graham Perry, I'm Managing Director Australasia for BWH Hotel Group, which has 3 brands, World Hotels, Best Western and Sure Stay. In terms of the silver lining, I think if we look at our business, we look at really how, it's about retention of your existing properties over the last couple of years in particular. It's about growing your portfolio, and it's about adding value. And I think the silver lining is the way that my team has really come together. Essentially, a couple of years ago when we realised we just had to look after our existing hotels. So it was about really looking at the retention side and supporting our hotels. And literally many of our roles essentially were redundant, but we turned them all upside down and to become what I would call account managers to support our hotels. And so we had a handful of hotels we gave to every one of our staff members, and they would reach out probably one every week, and they would look after hotels' finances, any operational issues, looking for local sales opportunities, because everything became local. The mental health of our people, because it's, when you're running a hotel, it's pretty lonely out there, so we did all that. And I think the silver lining is that the team has come together really, really solidly, and they all actually, my team members within head office, they all kind of understand each other's roles, so they've grown. And we've also come much closer to our hotels, so that's certainly our silver lining.
Well, that's fantastic.
My name is Craig Hooley. I'm the COO of Minor Hotels for Australia and New Zealand. I'm part of a Thai-based company operating out of Bangkok. We have about 600 hotels globally under 9 brands, and certainly for Minor, Australia and New Zealand is a key investment market for us. We just have about 60 hotels. We've got Avani's and Oaks in New Zealand, 6 properties, which have been open and operating for the last couple of years through COVID, although somewhat challenging, as some would say. The silver lining of it all is that, as always, there's a fantastic future. But one of the really big lessons from us was actually, personally and for business, is actually getting back to day. So stop thinking about everything else, and think about today. So thinking about the business, cash flow, assets, what's actually adding value, what's not, relationships, our team, I think is an important part. Valuing our team, spending more time with them, working out how we actually grow our team and actually grow our business into the future. And I think that sort of recalibration is the silver lining. That, it feels like I've been on like one of those, cleansing diets. The whole company feels fresher, it feels lighter, it feels more agile, and I think that's going to really bode for a successful future for us.
It's been a very common theme across the tourism industry that I represent, was that this the opportunity to take a beat. And while it wasn't the time that we all wanted, it certainly has enabled us to reflect on what it is that we want our businesses to be, how we want to support our people, what is the contribution we want to make to our communities, and there's definitely a silver lining there. David?
Yeah, I guess, so I'm David Ovendale. I'm the Chief Executive of the Top 10 Holiday Parks Group. It's a network of 46 holiday parks nationwide around New Zealand. And I guess I'm just going to, in terms of silver lining, I'm going to go back to January 2019, despite losing Chinese New Year, which was the precursor of the oncoming COVID onslaught, for want of a better word. We just come out of the best January in our history, and things were looking enormously rosy with a business that was 45% international. Come the 1st of March, the world had changed completely. We were in enormous trouble. And, everyone was dealing with it in the best way they possibly could, But we all had days where we'd rather stay under our duvet, me included. CEOs aren't immune to that sort of feeling as well. And one of the things that I reflect on now, and we reflected on at the time, was that while all that was going on, there was another disaster happening that we kind of got passed over, which was the Americans departing from Afghanistan and all the people trying to exit Kabul before the Taliban took over. And there was a story of a 17-year-old boy, correct, he might be 15, who was in the Afghani national football team, and he was so desperate to get out, he climbed into the wheel hub of a plane on the runway in Kabul, and it took off with him in the wheel hub, and obviously, as it got colder, he lost his grip, and he fell to his death. And whenever the chips are down, and whenever it was going really tough through that period, we talked about we weren't on the runway in Kabul, that life could always be worse. And that was a big and important part in my personal and our team's resilience foundation, the beginning of the resilience, because it isn't always perfect. And yes, there's a great silver lining coming. We can all see our forward bookings and they look wonderful, but the future is not certain. And that strength that came through that process, we still talk in our office today about if things aren't going quite as we'd hoped or as planned, we talk about we're not on the runway in Kabul, just to bring us back to the reality check that it might be tough, it might be shitty, but it can always be worse.
There's benefit in perspective, isn't there? Gavin.
Hi, I'm Gavin Faull. I'm the president of Swiss-Belhotel International, a Hong Kong-based company with 125 hotels in 20 countries. I'm one of the true New Zealanders on the panel here. I come from Taranaki, a great place, great rugby players until last weekend. And so that's where I grew up, and I come from the Aotearoa tribe in a place called the Waitara. So it's been a long journey for me, but David Thompson is really a liar. I'm not 100 years old, but he's pretty close, but I'm not 100, but he still owes me $50. So I owned a company with a Hong Kong partner, and it has been a real roller coaster ride. Australia and New Zealand have been our two biggest challenges because we took a bit of investment exposure, but we've come through it. What is the silver lining? The silver lining is that every day I talk to my 10 offices around the world. We sit down, I finish at about 11 o'clock at night, and just talk to them. Talk about what their problems are, how their teams are going. It's probably part of this thing we talk about, which is talked about a lot, is probably mental health management, because we're sitting there supporting each other. And that's been amazing how my executives have supported each other. And they've talked to each other. It's been tough, but however, they've got through it. And of course, the way your executives behave, your staff step up. And the staff have stepped up, multitasked, and gone that extra mile, because as we all know, it's tough out there, especially in Australia and New Zealand for staff. My senior vice president is today in Queenstown making beds because we just can't get people to make beds. So it's pretty, and there's no discussion, it just has to be done. So it's built up a good team, and probably some ideas there which the All Blacks could also use.
You don't have a direct line to the coach, I would have thought.
So,
He doesn't ask your opinion?
Well, if it wasn't for the Barrett boys, we wouldn't be anywhere, would we?
Look, I think there's a really interesting theme in all of your comments around team, about how team is forged in a crisis, and as we kind of look ahead to the summer where things, are going to enable us to function more fully as the kind of hotels and businesses that we want to be. How do we hold on to that strong team that was forged in a crisis? And it is particularly acute in accommodation at the moment, looking for people to work, right? We need people in our workforce, and that's going to ask more of our teams. One of the things I was interested in is, I'm sure in 2019 you had a strategy for 2020, and it probably had some bold aspirations in it. And it might have had some things that you were planning to do, some adaptations you were planning to make. As a result of COVID, was there anything you doubled down on, or anything you did through the COVID period that you really kind of went, actually, we're going to fast track that?
Probably lots of areas. Seriously, pretty well every area in the business, but one in particular was development, in terms of bringing on new hotels. We really did kind of analyse, the way we went about it. I think we've become much more agile, flexible, and we recognise that partnerships is a real key, and actually building a partnership approach. So, I think probably beforehand we'd say, this is us, this is, if you want to join us, this is the scenario. Now we're much more flexible and adaptive. I think that's true. I remember I was telling somebody a story yesterday. I remember we made a pitch for a hotel in Australia at the airport, and this was about 4 years ago, and I thought it went really well. And anyway, afterwards I said to one of a really good friend of mine who's on the client side, I said, how did we do? And he said, well, it's pretty average actually. And then when I spoke to his chairman, and he said, you franchisees, because essentially Best Western is a franchise, he said, you're all the same. You tell us your products you've got, you tell us how much it's going to cost, but you never tell us what you're going to deliver. So during the pandemic, we thought a lot about that, and as a result, we now do a lot of work in forecasting. We do a lot of work in feasibility studies and all of that. So as a result, we've got a much more, I think, complete package than we had before. And then in addition, what we also used is we used the opportunity in the pandemic to introduce some new brands into Australia. We introduced a brand called Aiden by Best Western, which is in Darling Harbour in Sydney and is really going gangbusters. It's a lifestyle brand, and it's introduced all the sort of lifestyle design features, technology. It's got automatic check-in. I heard today actually 70% of all of their check-ins at the hotel is done automatically on check-in by the guest. We obviously guide them through that. And then another one we're bringing on is executive residency, which is long stay. So we see lifestyle and long stay as here to stay, and we've used the period to kind of really hone development and those brands.
Thank you. David, I saw you nodding along as I was saying, what have you doubled down on? So what were you thinking?
So pre-COVID, we'd embarked on a fairly substantial digital journey. We had built a bunch of APIs from our 3 PMSs, New Books, CCOM and RMS into Microsoft Dynamics. We'd built another API from our website into Microsoft Dynamics, and it was the beginning of a data play. As you probably heard earlier today, data's great, but knowing what to do with it is actually the challenge. Just collecting it and harvesting it is just the beginning, the tip of the iceberg. So in the COVID environment, we decided to accelerate that, and we migrated our CRM from on-premise into the cloud, which offers a whole lot of additional capabilities. One of those particularly is that it's a native integration into Power BI, an analytical tool. So the intention in the very near future, migrating to the cloud gave us a whole lot of micro-personalization capabilities amongst our membership database. We've got 1.7 million transactions we had to migrate. We've got 65,000 paid-up members, individual members, and we could do a whole lot more with them directly. And then the next chapter is with the Power BI is to be able to provide a digital dashboard on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis to the properties. So they have a very clear picture of, current bookings, forward bookings, occupancy levels. So we can work collaboratively on filling future holes and things like that.
Fantastic. Craig, what did you double down on?
We doubled down in 3 areas, which I guess accelerated from the 19 plan as we went to 20. The first one is probably not something that gets talked about every day in our business, was balance sheet management, and just understanding how effective our balance sheet is, how do we make it a bit more agile, how do we make it more leverage better. And so we did a lot of work around understanding the value of cash and trying to teach the team also the value of where do we spend, how do we spend, and how do we get better ROI. And so that was a big part of the early part of 20, and certainly what it did do is it it actually, from the ground up, it brought up a whole lot of new initiatives that we put into the business that actually will stay forever. It's complete changes in the way we operate. And I'll give you a real simple example. Is in our commercial organisation, traditionally, we set a budget. We give marketing X number of dollars, we give sales a bit of dollars, and we give digital a bit of dollars and so forth. What we do now is we sort of run a more pooled model now where each functional department actually runs a submission sort of on a monthly basis of ROI initiatives they want to run. And then what happens is we value those initiatives based on performance, and then we approve the implementation. So we're not actually budget restrained anymore, we're actually ROI restrained. And that mind shift has really changed the way that the team think about how we actually spend money. The second way was not much so different to you. The second way is that we really wanted to connect better and more directly to our brand base or our consumers, and so we've done a lot of work, particularly around digital content, as you said. But more importantly, our Discovery Rewards loyalty program has been a big focus for us to continue globally to grow that database and actually make that Discovery program beneficial in ways that's meaningful for guests going forward. And that's a really hard one, because I guess the easiest way is to throw dollars at it, but it's how do you actually create value? And so I've done a lot of work around our Discovery Rewards program. And then finally is around people. We really accelerated what we did and how we approached the team. So we started looking at work practices and actually started to get feedback on what work practices was really driving them crazy, to be honest. What didn't work. So we started to bring in a lot of autonomous processes to actually get rid of some admin, particularly in front office, where there's a lot of admin in our business and any business really, to get rid of that and make their roles more meaningful, and then turn that around to say, well, okay, then if you're doing different things now, how do we do that? Is it more flexible? Can you change your hours? Can we get away from 3 shifts a day? The old 3 shifts in our industry. Do we really need 3 shifts? Can we move that around and create better life opportunity for people? So that was the third area we looked at and done a fair bit of work in that space as well. So those 3 things we really fast-tracked and got some great outcomes that we'll continue to take forward.
Awesome. I think it's really interesting what you were saying about shifting from budgets to return on investment, because as we look to the future of climate change and also having quadruple bottom lines and having to report on our contribution to carbon, for example, an ROI model gives you much more flexibility to bring in other types of return on investment. So it's really interesting. Gavin.
What do you want me to say? Well, I'm a small company, and I'm one of the owners, so it introduces some very interesting dynamics. And when your income goes to 0 in 24 hours, that's another dynamic you have to look at. So it's pretty horrendous. But you have to start thinking. And I say that most of the things we looked at through COVID, the issue was already there before COVID. COVID just gave us an opportunity to look at them, and COVID gave us an opportunity to do something. But it's amazing. Our bankers the next day called us and said, "You've got a problem." And they sat down and solved the problem for us. Our landlords did the same. So these are people who, I was going to say, they're actually your supporters, but in life they feel like your enemies. But it was amazing. I got my finance people, because we started doing cash flow budgets, as Craig keeps talking about. And my finance people said, well, we're in deficit. I said, that's right. They said, what do you do? I said, that's why you do a cash flow budget. You can't, if I didn't have a deficit, I wouldn't need a budget. I could pay all my bills. So it created a whole new approach to looking at things, a new approach of how to analyze things. And then it was interesting, we looked at our the way we did our staff rosters. We looked at different ways of doing things. I've got probably 60% of my business comes through e-commerce. So I expanded that team. And that team for our group is based in Indonesia, in Jakarta, because we have 70 hotels in Jakarta. So then I started looking at some things there, and my son actually runs it, and his wife said, I prefer to live in Bali. I didn't take too kindly to that request. But then I sat down, and 3 months later, I moved the whole e-commerce team to Bali. Because the environment, because it was easier than working in Jakarta, because you could actually find some interesting people to work for you. So, you know, we turned the whole thing upside down. You know, if a department in your company comes and say, I want to move to a holiday camp, you sort of get, my age, you get a little bit excited. But it's worked, and they love it. And 9 out of 10 of the team, 90% moved to Bali. They didn't invite me to go to Bali, but you have to look at things differently. And now, I can sit in Hong Kong and manage the company, or I can sit in New Zealand and manage the company. I can sit in Taranaki and manage the company, because we think all a little bit differently.
It's a really nice segue to the next question I'd love to ask you guys, which is, we're all struggling with workforce, but it's creating invention is what I'm seeing across the industry. You know, lots of different ways about trying to attract people to you to be an employer of choice. Subsidised health insurance, for example, which a couple of years ago might have not had the value that it does now. So in the conversation around workforce, I'm really keen to explore with you what you're doing to be an employer of choice, the sorts of things that you are adding to your packages for your people to keep them engaged and keep them with you. Moving to Bali sounds like a good one. Why don't you kick us off, Craig?
Sure. Yeah, look, I think we've all talked about people, and we're a people industry, so it's got to be at the forefront of our minds, you know, every single day. But what we really want to focus on is try to be different, and that was, I think we all find that hard. We've all been in the industry a long time. You know, in housekeeping, front office, food and beverage, there's 3 shifts a day, as we just said before. We don't seem to be able to find a way to change, and certainly what we did, you know, as we started to struggle with staff shortages, you know, particularly in 2020, we really started to think about how do we actually create value. And so the first thing actually we've been working on is actually CSR alignment. You know, how do our company values sit with personal values, and how do we actually fill that gap? So looking at how we actually invest time in third-party partnerships that actually, you know, our team members enjoy being part of as well. And so we've launched a number of initiatives in that space as well to actually get them to get involved with activities that they want to do, which I guess are a buffer between work and personal values and personal life. And I think we're seeing more of that being important going forward as well. The second thing I think we've already talked about earlier was turning rosters and work days, schedules around and make that more flexible and be able to adjust to people's lives a lot more. And so we're very open now to turning the whole schedule upside down and working out how we can do that better. And that's sort of been a really important part for us. And then the final one is, I think you talked about health insurance. We've just embarked. Actually, there's 2 more. Sorry. There's the whole benefits. So we've just partnered with a third-party company now that actually gives a whole suite of benefits to all our team members across the company. Everything from supermarkets, health insurance, health club memberships, all those sort of day-to-day expenses they get. If they actually use them all, I think there's a couple of $1,000s a year in savings per team member involved in that. And so we don't know how it's going to go, but we thought we were going to give that out and give it a go and just see what the feedback is. So we've literally only launched that in the last month or so. And then the final way was that we've developed a whole online learning platform, but we haven't restricted it to hotel, we're restricted to any subject. In fact, someone told me yesterday, I don't know how true this is, so I could be wrong, but someone said to me, he actually can be a veterinary nurse through our learning platform. So it's not actually about what our industry is, it's about learning whatever you want to learn. And I think that's also an important part of the future.
That's pretty exciting. David?
Yeah, I guess not a great deal to add to what Craig has just said. We've gone down a similar road, probably on a much more oily rag, so we've done most of that legwork ourselves. So since the COVID onslaught, we've introduced medical insurance, an opt-in medical insurance scheme. We provided corporate fuel cards, which the staff pay for the fuel themselves, but they leverage the corporate discount. We're paying them, not everywhere, but most places we're paying the living wage. Those that are not are working towards it. Many of the parks are offering accommodation together with with a job. In our head office, we continue with the working from home arrangement, not because we want to run away from COVID, because one day a week at home takes 20% out of your fuel bill. So that helps people deal with their everyday living costs. And really, I guess the goal in the first instance to become the employer of choice is to look after the people you've already got. So we work very, very hard to make the career something of a lifestyle. You know, I've been in tourism for 25 years. Everyone's always said to me, you get paid a lot less, but you work in tourism, you're the lucky person. And really, the truth of the matter is we work 65 hours a week, every week, including holidays, as do our people, and we get paid 20% less, but the lifestyle component is still there. So we're trying to recognize we live in these amazing places in our park network. We feel fortunate and blessed to be there, and the goal is to try and reinforce that with a range of other benefits, group buying, cards, etc., to make people, to help them with their daily life and living costs, but to make them feel valued every single day.
Thank you. Gavin?
Well, I'm going to repeat what's already been said, but the key thing is to have a special relationship with your staff. And to have a special relationship with your staff, they have to know that you actually care. And I know that's pretty hard sometimes. We've got other issues on the table. But during COVID, we introduced third-party training systems, a company called Tipsy out of Australia, and the staff just took to it like, they're so motivated to learn something. Then we introduced an executive training program through Aotearoa, and the whole attitude changes, and it was the fact that we were interested in their career and where they're going and how to build them up for their next move, and it's amazing. I've got a problem in Vietnam for an expatriate who can't get his visa because the Vietnamese say he has to have a university exam, university qualifications. So then I sat down and I looked at this Aotearoa system and found it was a diploma. I used to be involved in running PIMS in New Plymouth and Blue Mountains in Australia. So we turned it around upside down and we found out this diploma would qualify as a university qualification. So we actually solved the problem for some guy who was in his late 40s. We thought we had no solution. Now we have a solution. So, as I said from the beginning, we've got to get close to your team, close to your people. It's not easy, and sometimes you have a few disappointments, but you have to manage them.
That's fantastic. We're coming to the end of our time, so why don't you close us out with something that you're doing to be an employer of choice?
In terms of the subject we just talked about, the word that sums it all up is culture. I don't think skills shortages or culture is something that started during the pandemic. It's something that I and the organisation have always focused on. You've got to make it a great place to work where people want to come and work. And it's never been more so than it is now. And if you do that, you'll create a bond with your people. Very clearly, before the pandemic, I think many of us here were saying, you really need to work from the office. And some of us probably thought about having people work from home. And then during the pandemic, it forced us to do that, work from home. And what we've realised is that what we suspected is you can trust people. And you can trust people to do the job from home, from anywhere. So the hybrid model that we now have is not something that's going to be here for the short term. It's here to stay. And I think the litmus test about whether you can attract people or retain people is a good example is from our organisation. We've had 5 people for various reasons have left the organisation. And we tried Seek, we tried LinkedIn, and quite frankly, the quality of applicants wasn't that great. But everyone, within a month, we filled by one of my team, tapping someone they knew on the shoulder and said, come and work for us. And you can only do that if your team want to work there anyway. And what Best Western and BWH do is that we do something called a pulse survey 3 times a year. And what it does is test the pulse of your individuals. And essentially, we ask one question, and the one question is, would you recommend working for Best Western or BWH to your friend and family? And we all see the results of that, and we're all looking for a really positive ENPS in terms of how many people want to work there. And we measure that. And then the proof in the cooking is when people leave, you tap them on the shoulder, come and join us. So at the moment, hybrid models of working from home is really important. Training is incredibly important. And there are third-party training systems out there because you've got to actually, it's about career development. Give people a reason why they want to work. And the final thing I would say, one thing I was really concerned about, in Australia, we kind of finished the pandemic although we still haven't, but we think we did about 2 or 3 months ago. And I get a sense in New Zealand here that you're just at that point now. And I remember what we did. I was really concerned that all my staff who stuck with us all the way through the pandemic would actually go, wow, I stuck with them for 2 years, I've done that, what's next? And I was really concerned, and I wanted the what's next to be with me, not with somebody else. So what we did, and it was really important, we pulled all of our staff from all over Australia for a 2-day session, and we did a strengths exercise to talk on their strengths, and we did a motivational thing. And the purpose of that was just to reunite the team, create bonding, and actually for them to say subconsciously, okay, I've finished that project, now I want to stay with BWH to do that. So it's culture. It's everything you do is important to retain people and make people want to come and work for you.
Thank you. What a lovely way to finish. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time and your insights, for sharing them with an audience. It's been very attentive. And Adrian, we're back to you.
Thanks, Rebecca.